Pang always dreamed of becoming a famous K-pop star. However, life had other plans. No matter how hard he tried, it didn't work. He didn't have the look or the charisma to be a K-pop idol. The industry rejected him over and over again, so he disappeared from the spotlight. But not for long, because instead of giving up, he changed the game.
Bang Si-hyuk 씨 축하드립니다.
The man they once ignored would go on to build one of the biggest music groups in history. But that success, it didn't come easy. His company was broke, and everyone said he'd fail. So, how did a failed singer become one of the most powerful men in music? Well, today we will discover his story and how he changed K-pop forever. Bang Si-hyuk didn't grow up in luxury, just a quiet kid born in South Korea during the late 1970s, a country still finding its identity. Back then, music wasn't easy to find. No streaming apps, no global playlists. If you wanted to hear something, you had to really search for it. But for Bang, the moment he found music, it was like discovering a new world. He wasn't the loudest in the room. He wasn't the kid who wanted attention. He was quiet, thoughtful, always thinking. But when he heard a melody, it felt amazing. However, that little boy didn't want to just listen forever. As he got older, the dreams grew louder. He wanted to sing, to be on stage. He wanted to create songs that made people feel something. But the world around him didn't think like that. His family was traditional and academic. Music? Sure, maybe as a hobby, but as a career? That was out of the question. In those days, being an artist wasn't respected. It wasn't safe. Parents wanted doctors, lawyers, government workers, not singers. And even if he pushed through that, well, there was something else waiting for him. The brutal image standards of the K-pop industry. It wasn't enough to have talent. You had to look like a star, act like a star, fit into a narrow, shiny box built by big companies. Bang didn't fit. He showed up to auditions, ready to give his all. He sang with everything he had, hoping someone would see his heart. But the judges didn't listen. They scanned him, his face, his posture, his idol potential. And every time, they said no. Not because he wasn't good enough, but because he didn't look the part. One rejection turned into two turned into 5, then 10. Before long, Bang got used to hearing the word no. Every audition, every try, it was the same. You're talented, but not what we're looking for. You're good, just not the right fit. Each time, it stung a little more. Because he wasn't just chasing a job, he was chasing a dream. And with every door closed, that dream felt more and more distant as time slipped away. At night, he probably lay there in the dark, asking himself like, why am I not good enough? Should I let go? Am I chasing something that was never meant for me? And for the first time, he considered giving up. But Bang had something inside him, a quiet kind of fire. And just when the dream seemed to be slipping away, something shifted. If they didn't want him on stage, he'd find a way to be behind it. Instead of breaking down over what he couldn't do, he started focusing on what he could. Maybe he wasn't the one to sing the song, but maybe he could be the one to write it. The small shift, it changed everything. Bang began experimenting, writing melodies, chasing emotions through chords and lyrics. And the more he did it, the more he realized this was it. This wasn't a backup plan. It felt like home. Songwriting wasn't work, it was natural. He started writing for other artists, watching how the industry moved, studying what made a song not just good, but unforgettable. And slowly, step by step, he began to build a new kind of reputation. Not as the face of music, but as the mind behind it. But what Bang didn't know yet was that everything was learning. Every late night, every rejection, every quiet victory was secretly preparing him for the biggest gamble of his life. A gamble no one believed in, a group no one wanted, and a decision that would change music history forever. The new path was better for him, but it didn't mean it was easy. While others stepped into the spotlight, winning awards, going viral, Bang stayed in the background, grinding, writing, waiting. He spent long nights in dimly lit rooms, surrounded by instruments, sheets, and silence. He wrote hundreds of songs. Most of them never saw the light of day, but he was making progress, and that's important. He got an opportunity to work at JYP Entertainment, one of South Korea's biggest music companies. This was a turning point for him. At JYP, Bang worked closely with founder Park Jin-young, creating hit songs for some of Korea's most successful artists. And slowly, his name began to rise, not in front of the camera, but behind the scenes. He was finally winning, but even then, success didn't erase the memories of struggle. Bang still remembered what it felt like to be overlooked, to pour your soul into something and still be told, not enough. The pain was stuck with him, and it gave him something most producers didn't have: real empathy. While others focused on image and performance, Bang looked deeper. He saw the human behind the idol. To him, music was a way to tell someone's story. At JYP, he built hit after hit and earned respect as one of the industry's top producers. But even with all the success, something inside him kept whispering, this isn't it. The industry was still focused on perfection, but Bang didn't want perfect. He wanted real. He dreamed of music that wasn't just fun to dance to, but that made you feel something. And that quiet idea, that little fire in his chest, it never left. Until finally, in 2005, Bang made the most radical decision of his life. He left JYP to start his own company. At the time, it seemed like a crazy move. JYP was one of the most successful music companies in South Korea, and Bang had a stable career there. Why leave it all behind? Well, the answer was simple. Bang wanted to create something that was completely his own. Back in the early 2000s, the K-pop industry was like a factory. The rules were strict, almost like a military camp. Trainees lived in small rooms with other trainees, waking up before sunrise to practice all day. They weren't allowed to eat what they wanted. Some companies even checked their weight every day. Everything was decided for them: how they talked, what they wore, even their personalities. For Bang, this was a big moment of realization. He had spent years trying to be the perfect idol, but he never stopped to ask himself, did he even want this life? As he watched other trainees struggle to keep up their perfect image, he had a new thought. Music wasn't just about control. It wasn't about perfection. It was about emotion, storytelling, connection. And if the industry wasn't giving artists the space to be real, maybe he would. He called his new company Big Hit Entertainment, but starting it from scratch wasn't easy. Bang didn't have the same resources as gigantic competitors, and for a long time, Big Hit struggled just to stay afloat. However, Bang believed in his vision. He kept writing songs, producing music, and dreaming of a day when his little company would make a big impact. If Bang had stayed at JYP, he might have had a comfortable career as a producer, but by taking a risk and following his vision, he set himself on a path that would lead to something much bigger. Little did he know, this decision would eventually lead to the creation of BTS and the start of the global music empire. At first, it was just a small company with a big dream. In fact, Big Hit started with just a handful of employees and very little money. And when you're the new guy with no proven success, convincing young talent to join you, it's almost impossible. Everyone wanted to go where the spotlight was. JYP, SM, YG, those companies were already winning. Big Hit was just a name, a dream with no results. There were no hit songs, no big breaks, no calls from sponsors. Bang was burning through his own savings just to keep the lights on. Some months, he didn't even pay himself. Dinner, ramen, or a convenience store kimbap. Sleep, usually at the office, on a couch, or not at all. And when he reached out for help, most investors didn't even pick up the phone. The company was barely holding on. Employees worked long hours for little pay. Starting something from scratch isn't a movie montage like Rocky Balboa. It's messy, it's lonely. It's nights where everything feels like it's falling apart. But even then, Bang didn't back down. He kept going, signing whoever was willing to take a chance, but even that was hard. Parents didn't want their kids joining a no-name company, and most job applicants didn't take him seriously. Still, he kept trying. Some of Big Hit's early acts had small wins. Not bad, not great, just enough to stay alive. Bang tested things, tweaking ideas, learning from every mistake. He started thinking, what if we didn't just make music people like? What if we made music people loved because they saw themselves in it? He knew storytelling mattered, not just the lyrics, but the way fans saw the artist's journey, the pain, the joy, the struggle, the dream. That became Big Hit's secret weapon, emotional connection. By the late 2000s, Big Hit was still small, still in the shadows, but Bang, he wasn't sad. He believed being small was actually a gift. He could take risks, move fast, focus on depth over surface. Sure, not everything worked, like 88, a co-ed vocal trio with real talent. They had great voices, but they didn't make it big. Another lesson. Still, Bang stayed steady because in his gut, he felt it. Something was coming. He didn't know what, he didn't know when, but he believed the world was about to change. After a few years fighting uphill battles, Bang and his team tried something new. They launched 2AM, a ballad group formed as a subunit under JYP's management, and for a while, it looked promising. 2AM had talent, the songs were beautiful, and fans responded. But there was one big problem. Big Hit didn't own them. They couldn't fully shape the group, couldn't guide the direction, and more importantly, they didn't make much money. It was like watching someone else drive the car you helped build. That's when it hit him. If Big Hit was going to survive, they needed their own group, but wanting that and getting it, two very different things. Big Hit had a few months of cash left. After all the years of grinding, of building things from nothing, they were running out of time. This wasn't just about a business failing. This was his dream slipping through his fingers. Every person who said, "You should have stayed at JYP," it felt like he was watching everything fall apart in slow motion. But even in that silence, even with the weight of the world on his shoulders, Bang was already planting the seeds for something huge. Something no one could see yet, not even him. Because just around the corner was the moment that would change his life forever and change the future of K-pop with it. By 2010, Big Hit was still a tiny name in the sea of giants. He needed real people. That's when the idea for a new group started taking shape. The first step, find the right ones. Big Hit opened auditions, looking for more than just looks or talent. They wanted artists who felt authentic, who had something to fight for, and that's when he found him. A quiet, sharp-minded teenage rapper from Ilsan, Kim Namjoon. You know him as RM. Back then, he was just a kid obsessed with hip-hop, writing lyrics that hit harder than most adults twice his age. Bang couldn't believe it, how someone so young could have so much to say. RM didn't just perform, he felt every word. He became the first member, the anchor, but the search didn't stop there. Next came Min Yoongi, better known as Sugar. He wasn't flashy, he didn't smile much, but when he rapped, you listened, because behind every line was pain, truth, and years of surviving a world that rarely gave second chances. Then came a burst of energy. Jung Ho-seok, aka J-Hope. He wasn't a rapper, he was a dancer. Every step, every spin, it was like watching lightning with rhythm. But it wasn't just his dancing, it was him, his laughter, his warmth. He was the light to balance the storm. And finally, the vocals. Kim Seok-jin, he didn't have formal training, but he had presence. That quiet confidence that made you want to root for him. Then Park Jimin, whose voice could go from soft and delicate to heart-wrenching in a single note. Kim Taehyung, or V, with that deep, one-of-a-kind tone. Unusual, magnetic, unforgettable. And then the youngest, Jung Jungkook, a teenager with a voice so raw, so powerful, it stopped people in their tracks. He could sing anything. He could be anything. Piece by piece, the puzzle came together. 7 kids from different cities, different stories, different dreams. None of them were perfect, but together, they had something no one else did. And even though no one else saw it yet, Bang could feel it. This wasn't just a group. This was the beginning of something that might, just maybe, change everything. Each new member brought something different to the table. Not just talent, not just skill, but chemistry. There was a kind of magic happening, like puzzle pieces snapping into place. Putting a group together is like building a dream team. Not just who's the best, but who fits, who lifts each other up. And once the 7 were chosen, that's when the real work began. But Bang had a vision. He didn't want BTS to be another polished group. He wanted truth. He wanted them to talk about what it really felt like to be young in the world that demanded perfection. He pushed them to write their own lyrics, to speak from their heart, and they did. Late nights in the studio, long talks about what mattered, not just to them, but to the kids who might listen one day. But by 2012, the pressure was crushing them. They had been training for years, still no debut, just waiting, somewhere ready to walk away. Sugar was burned out, broke tired, wondering if his dream was worth it. J-Hope nearly left the group altogether. Jungkook, the youngest, was overwhelmed by the weight of it all. For a moment, it really looked like BTS might end before they even began. But Bang wouldn't let them quit. He believed in them more than anything he'd ever built before. And then, finally, on June 13th, 2013, they stepped on stage as BTS for the first time. There were no flashing lights, no screaming crowds, just 7 kids standing under the spotlight, everything they had riding on a single song. Backstage, Bang watched in silence. So many questions filled the air. Would anyone care? Would the world even notice? Was this all a beautiful mistake? Then the beat dropped. No More Dream, a debut song unlike anything the industry expected. No sweet love lyrics. Instead, a war cry for every kid who'd been told to chase a dream that wasn't their own. A song about expectations, pressure, and fighting back. And BTS, they didn't look perfect. They looked real. The world didn't fall in love with them overnight. They didn't have huge sponsors, glittering awards, or a PR machine behind them. In fact, a lot of people didn't take them seriously at all. Critics shrugged, other fans didn't even bother to look twice. But BTS had something money couldn't buy. Heart, and something else that changed everything. Connection. They didn't wait for magazines or TV shows to tell their story. They grabbed the camera, logged onto Twitter and YouTube, and told it themselves. They shared their highs, their lowest lows, the stuff most idols were told to keep hidden. And slowly, the world started listening. What came next? Nobody could have predicted it. But that raw honesty, it was about to break the internet, rewrite the rules of fame forever. By the mid-2010s, something was quietly shifting. BTS had started making real noise in South Korea. Their raw music was resonating with young people across the country. Not just fans, but listeners. People who weren't usually into idol music. People who suddenly felt seen, but beyond Korea, that still felt out of reach. K-pop to most of the world was a niche, flashy visuals, catchy beats, maybe a viral dance or two, but not something taken seriously, and especially not in the West. No Korean group had truly broken through into the Western market, not because they weren't good, but because the system wasn't built for them. The language barrier, the cultural gap, an industry that often favored the familiar over the foreign. Still, Bang and BTS believed in what they had, because it wasn't just the music, it was how they connected. They started reaching out to fans directly. Not through interviews or polished PR, but through tweets, homemade vlogs, rough-edged live streams. They didn't speak perfect English, but they tried. And that effort, that vulnerability, built something rare: trust. Fans didn't just hear BTS, they knew them. By 2015, that slow, patient connection began to spark. That year, BTS released The Most Beautiful Moment in Life Part 1, and everything changed. This album didn't chase radio hits. It talked about feeling lost and about trying to survive in a world that didn't seem to care. Songs like I Need You and Run weren't about fairy tales. They were about pain. And for so many young people around the world, that pain was familiar. This wasn't just K-pop anymore. It was something else. Some call that album their breakthrough, but the truth is, the world had already started to notice. The real turning point? It came a year before, in 2014, when a rookie group from a tiny label landed in Los Angeles for an event called K-Con. It was a huge convention for K-pop fans, but BTS wasn't a headliner. They were still rookies, unknown to most of the audience. They weren't sure what to expect. Maybe a few people would clap, maybe a couple fans would know their names. But when they stepped on stage, something unexpected happened. The crowd screamed. Not the kind of noise you make for a group you just discovered. The kind you make when you've been waiting. From backstage, Bang watched in silence. And for the first time, he saw that maybe, just maybe, the world was listening. These weren't just Korean fans screaming at K-Con. These were international fans. People who had found BTS through Twitter threads, YouTube videos, and Tumblr vlogs. Not because they were pushed by TV ads or magazine covers, because they felt something. And this wasn't just casual hype. These fans knew everything. Every lyric, every inside joke, every choreography move. It was kind of unreal. Fans started sharing everything. Edits, translations, fan art. One post turned into 10, 10 turned into thousands. It became a ripple effect. then a wave. What started as a tiny community turned into something massive, a movement, a family. For years, big agencies brushed them off. BTS was just that hip-hop idol experiment from that small company, nothing serious. But that couldn't last, because the numbers were growing, the concerts were selling out. The fan base, now calling themselves ARMY, was becoming impossible to ignore. Executives from major labels started reaching out. Some even tried to buy Big Hit. Others offered to sign BTS under their own company. Pang's answer? No. He didn't even hesitate. This wasn't about making quick money. This was about standing his ground and proving that the underdogs could win and that BTS didn't need to be perfect. Then in 2017, it happened. BTS won the Top Social Artist Award at the Billboard Music Awards. They walked up on that global stage in front of millions and made history.
You know, we still cannot believe that we're standing here on this stage at the Billboard Music Awards. Oh my gosh. Most importantly, this award belongs to the every people all around the world that shine the love and light on us by the millions and make BTS proud really every day. Please, ARMY, remember what we say. Love myself, love yourself. 정말 사랑하고 감사합니다. 더 멋진 방탄소년단 되겠습니다. Thank you, Billboard, for supporting us. Thank you.
It was the first time a K-pop group had been recognized like that by the Western media. However, it wasn't luck. It was years of late-night live streams, self-written songs, and fans who believed. That moment opened the gates. People who had never heard a word of Korean started listening. And BTS, they didn't slow down. They performed at the American Music Awards, they showed up on the Ellen DeGeneres Show, The Tonight Show, and more. They started working with artists like Steve Aoki and Halsey. Real collaborations, not just surface-level features. And with every move, they got closer to becoming what no one thought was possible. Global superstars on their own terms. In 2018, their album Love Yourself, Tear, debuted at #1 on the Billboard 200. That had never happened before for a Korean group. It wasn't just a win, it was history. And the momentum didn't stop there. They sold out stadiums. Wembley in London, the Rose Bowl in LA, places most artists only dreamed of playing. Tens of thousands of fans singing along to songs in a language they didn't even speak. That's the thing about BTS. It was never just about numbers, sales, or trophies. It was about something deeper. Their songs, mostly in Korean, were topping charts in countries across the world. Why? Because emotions don't need translation. Pain, love, hope, doubt. Those things are human. BTS sang about them with so much heart that people felt it, even if they didn't understand every word. As their fame grew, they didn't just celebrate it, they used it. They started the Love Yourself campaign, urging fans to care for themselves, flaws and all. Then they teamed up with UNICEF to launch Love Myself, a global effort to end violence against children and teens. It raised millions, but more importantly, it started conversations. Conversations about kindness, healing, and worth. In 2018, RM stood in front of the United Nations, not as a pop star, not as an idol, but as a young man sharing his truth. By the time the 2020s rolled in, BTS had already done what no one thought possible. They weren't just the biggest K-pop group, they were one of the biggest acts in the world. They broke records, they won award after award, they tore down walls that had been standing for decades. But maybe the most powerful thing they did, they brought people together. Fans from all over the world, different languages, different lives, different stories, were suddenly connected. All because of this one group of 7 boys who never stopped being honest. But that wasn't the end, because Pang had a plan to take things to an even higher level. For Pang, music was never the final goal. Even when Big Hit was hanging on by a thread, when the lights almost went out, he was already dreaming beyond albums and tours. While most companies stayed focused on the next hit song, Pang kept asking himself a bigger question. What if we stopped being just a music company and became something much bigger? It sounded crazy, too risky, maybe even foolish, but dreaming bigger was the only way Bang knew how to live. That's why in 2021, Big Hit Entertainment didn't just rebrand, it transformed into something new: hype, To most people, it looked just like a name change, but to Bang, it was everything. It was a promise, a signal to the world that he wasn't here to chase trends. He was here to build worlds. Music would always be the heart of HYBE, but around it, Bang imagined something far greater. Stories, technologies, communities, a whole universe fans could step into and call their own. He wasn't just building for today, he was building for a future where even the brightest stars eventually fade. Because Bang understood something most leaders forgot. No group stays at the top forever. Even BTS, with all their awards, all their history-making success, couldn't carry a company for the next 50 years. If HYBE was going to survive for decades, it had to grow beyond the stage, beyond any one artist, beyond even K-pop itself. And so, Bang set out on a new mission: expand, connect, dream even bigger. One of the first steps, not fighting competitors, joining them. In 2020, HYBE made its first bold move by acquiring Source Music, home to the beloved group G-Friend. But that was just the beginning. In April 2021, Bang did something no one saw coming. HYBE bought Ithaca Holdings, the American company behind Justin Bieber, Ariana Grande, and Demi Lovato. It was a moment in history, one of the biggest music acquisitions the world had ever seen. How did it happen? It wasn't luck, it wasn't timing, it was Bang's vision and a phone call. Scooter Braun, the founder of Ithaca, had been watching HYBE quietly from across the ocean. He saw the way Bang built Big Hit from nothing. He saw the way BTS shattered barriers no one thought possible, and he realized something most people miss. This wasn't just another K-pop company, this was the future of entertainment. So he did what few expected. He reached out to Bang Si-hyuk. The first meeting wasn't just a business talk, it was a collision of two titans from opposite sides of the world. Bang, quiet, patient, always thinking 5 moves ahead. Braun, bold, charming, used to running Hollywood rooms. Two very different men, but underneath it all, the same dream. What if we didn't just win here? What if we take over the world? The deal was sealed for a jaw-dropping $1.05 billion. But what about Justin Bieber and Ariana Grande? At first, there was tension in the air. K-pop companies had a reputation for strict rules and total control. Some wondered, was this the beginning of a new era or the end of freedom for Western stars? Bang heard the worries and responded with calm honesty. We're not here to control you. We're here to create something bigger together. That was the heart of HYBE's vision. Not domination, connection. Within months, the walls between K-pop and Western pop began to fall. Collaborations were being whispered about behind closed doors. The world was watching, and HYBE wasn't done yet. Bang knew that music alone wouldn't be enough to survive the future. The real future? Belonging, experience, technology. While other companies scrambled when the pandemic hit, HYBE was already prepared. They had built Weverse, a revolutionary platform where fans could meet their idols directly, get exclusive content, and share moments that felt personal, even across oceans. When concerts disappeared, HYBE didn't panic. They built virtual arenas where millions of fans could scream together from their living rooms. While others froze, Bang moved forward. HYBE wasn't just about BTS anymore either. New groups like Tomorrow X Together and Unhypened weren't just releasing music. They were telling stories fans could live inside. Every artist was the heart of a living, breathing world. HYBE had become a universe, one no one else could copy. But even the biggest dreams have shadows. And in 2024, those shadows came crashing down. It started with a leak. Thousands of pages, private HYBE documents spilled out onto the internet. Inside, ugly words about rival groups like Stray Kids and Blackpink, accusations, strategy notes. It looked like HYBE had been trying to quietly tear down others while lifting itself up. The internet exploded, and fans felt betrayed. HYBE wasn't supposed to be about tearing others down. It was supposed to be about lifting people up. The big question no one could ignore: did Bang know? Was he part of this? Trust built over the years was suddenly cracking, and Bang Si-hyuk found himself facing the hardest truth of it all. Sometimes, the bigger the empire you build, the bigger the storms you have to survive. And the storm was only getting started. The world was watching Bang Si-hyuk very closely. It started when the government began digging into HYBE's past deals. They found something ugly. When HYBE exploded into a major company back in 2020, some secret money moves had been made behind the scenes. And who had quietly walked away with hundreds of billions of won? Bang himself. Reports said he had pocketed over 400 billion won, nearly $338 million. In a way, that didn't sit right with the law. Now it wasn't just fans asking questions, it was prosecutors. And just when things couldn't get worse, Bang slipped up. In an interview, he spoke proudly about ENHYPEN, one of HYBE's rising boy groups. He called their early look dark and sexy, even back when they were trainees. But there was one major problem. At the time, they were still kids. The internet exploded again, this time with outrage. Fans, parents, and critics alike were furious. How could someone who built his empire on youth and dreams say something like that? And then the betrayal came from inside his own walls. Min Hee-jin, the creative mind behind HYBE's sub-label Adore, turned against him. She accused HYBE of losing its way, of caring about money more than music, of treating her group, New Jeans, as nothing more than another product on the shelf. By November 2024, she walked out publicly, and it was a moment that sent shockwaves through the industry. HYBE, the company that once seemed unstoppable, was starting to crack. For years, Bang Si-hyuk had been seen as a hero, the man who made the impossible happen, the man who gave K-pop to the world. But now, the world was asking a much harder question. Was he still the dreamer who built something beautiful, or just another businessman protecting his empire? One thing was clear, he wasn't a flawless hero. He was human, brilliant, ambitious, and like all humans, flawed. Along the way, Bang made choices, some bold, some deeply controversial. And even now, after everything, he refuses to slow down. He believes that K-pop's rise was just the first chapter. The real future, he says, will be something the world has never seen before. AI-generated music, virtual idols, fully interactive concerts that erase the line between fan and artist. Behind the scenes, HYBE is already building that future, pushing into technologies most companies are too afraid to touch. Because Bang knows the truth, in an industry that changes overnight, yesterday's success means nothing. Only the next dream matters. That hunger, the relentless drive to build the next big thing, is what sets him apart. For better or for worse, Bang Si-hyuk is not done yet. He's still out there, still dreaming, still daring to build worlds. Back then, he was just a quiet guy who couldn't dance. People called him boring, said he didn't have the look, said he'd never make it. Now, he's the reason half of the planet listens to K-pop. The same industry that once said no to him now depends on him. He used to stand behind the stars. Now, he creates them. He used to write music for others. Now his name is on the building. And maybe that's the real lesson here. You don't have to be the loudest in the room. You just have to stay long enough until everyone else gets tired. Remember how this started? Just a failed singer, no fans, no spotlight. Maybe that's what gave him the power to change everything. Because when the door slammed in his face, he didn't try to knock again. He built a whole new door. And now, here's the part no one can answer. What if he had made it as a singer? What if his dream had worked out? Would there even be a BTS? Would K-pop even be this big? Or did the future actually create something bigger? I guess we'll never know.